Welcome to Standard Bank Talks with Funeka Montjane. And my name is Ron Derby, the PR lead for personal and private banking. Funeka, when we started these conversations some time ago, you said there were four pillars that you wanted us to focus on. Amongst them, youth, women, I think you've tackled that, and travel. And today, it's art, the most exciting one. I'm a bit of a fanboy today, as I was saying earlier to you, because we have Greg Maqoma here, man. I'm like I've met him a few times. Sambi I met earlier this year, and she's amazing. She belongs to Standard Bank. And of course, we have Lerato, who I'll bring a much broader introduction to who you are. But I'll start with you, Funeka. Art. Why is it one of the four pillars that you wanted us to focus these conversations on?
So there's a lot of things I can say about art, Ron, but let me say three things. The first one is, if you think about our purpose in personal private banking, which is how do we give our clients who are Africans across the continent confidence that they can create wealth, grow wealth, and pass it to the next generation. Those four pillars for me represent wealth, quite interesting vectors of wealth creation of the continent. You know that our continent is going to go through an unprecedented growth in wealth, which is about time after so much of the promise. It's time for it to deliver. So if you think about young people, if you think about women, a powerful block, and art, I think art is definitely a key pillar of that because for me, it represents heritage. I think it represents an economic block, and it also it represents an investment class.
It's Summer we met with was Makanda Festival. We had the conversation about art and preparing for this particular conversation. Now you're the manager, chief curator at Standard Bank Gallery, artist, art historian, writer. Just give us your relationship with art, as where it starts and where it is now.
I started this role 6 years ago. I can't believe I've been in this role as the curator of a very, I think, important art institution, not just in the South African landscape, but in the continent itself. And 6 years is a long time. I always laugh at how 6 years in art terms is like really long to commit to I guess a trajectory that I think at the time also Standard Bank was looking at shifting the kind of audience that was coming to the gallery over the years. The gallery was obviously established in 1990, which is 34 years ago, and you can imagine the kinds of exhibitions it's held that have built a kind of a art history, right? It's contributed to a history of art, of artists that have exhibited in that space, but also hosted very important exhibitions that I think have shifted our thinking around African art and how African artists actually relate in the global context. Picasso in Africa is one of them, for example, where, yes, there's this conversation around Western art versus African art and, and again, it's kind of this class or, grading of art and who's more important and who's kind of the lead in the conversation or the narrative around art. And I think those exhibitions have created a space where African artists can, I think, relate back to the European context where the West is not the center anymore, but that is this exchange. And I think those exhibitions were important in establishing those kinds of conversations to start happening and to where we are right now. Yeah.
And sitting next to you, Gregory Maqoma, the legendary man, internationally renowned dancer, choreographer. I've seen a few of your works and more than 25 years in the industry, and I understand about to retire. Are you officially off stage or are you still in this game? But as you tell us a bit about that, just give us when did you find dance and that shoulder movement? Just tell us a bit about you and your relationship.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for inviting me in this beautiful table with beautiful human beings. Just like Standard Bank Art Gallery, 34 years, I walked into a studio for the first time in my life, into a dance studio, and I was trained at moving into dance. And in 1999, I realized that there is a gap within this artistic landscape, and I wanted to close that gap, to create a space for people who look like myself, who want to be dancers. And Vuyani Dance Theatre was founded in 1999. So this year we're celebrating 25 years as an organization. And to stay afloat for 25 years in an environment that is always so fragile, I think for me was speaking to one, the tenacity of who we've become, the stories that we tell that are not just only localized, but they find way in which they can connect globally. Hence, yesterday the company left for LA to perform, then they're coming back to the Market Theatre with the same work later in the month. So there is that sense of ownership of our own stories, because it is so critical and important that we continue to tell our stories in the way that we want to. And I always say the arts have always been the buffer between wealth and humanity. And that for me is where the excitement is at, because we don't talk so much about how do we create wealth through the art. And I think that's a point in case that I wanna put on the table.
If I think about a country as a business and think about what do we sell, one of the big things that we sell as a country is immense amount, and as a continent, immense amount of creativity.
Absolutely.
And that is an economic activity.
Yes.
And sometimes we don't always identify it as such. But I think whether it's art, whether it's visual arts, whether it's movement, fashion, we're actually creators. And it's something that I think needs a little bit more cultivation and recognition, because that's what we already do. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't agree more with that. And when I was just looking in terms of how do I want to celebrate these 25 years, and for me, it was about the value chain. That when people see a dance, a production on stage, there are so many elements that contribute to it. Fashion, we work a lot with David Clalia. I work with Black Coffee as a fashion designer. There are also younger designers that we bring on board. That whole value chain, for me, speaks to the wealth or that their production in itself can generate.
And Lerato Bereng, Ngwanawa Masiru, I worked there for a time. So, and now Joburg resident, director at Stevenson Gallery with spaces in Amsterdam and Cape Town. Just your relationship, I suppose, with art, as I ask everyone.
Yeah, my goodness. I mean, Gregory gave such a great kind of picture of dance and the importance of culture and I don't know, the tenacity of staying afloat. I think my relationship with art comes from a slightly different space, in that I'm in the visual arts, but not that different, in that tenacity is important. And I've been at the gallery at Stevenson for 14 years. Samir says 6 is a long time, try 14. And it's just been, over the years, it has been really wonderful to be part of building something. It's really felt like, when we started curating, Samir and myself, our generation, there were few curators to look up to on the continent. That we really could see ourselves reflected back through. And over the years, I think we've all worked at making it and deciding what it was. I didn't even know what a curator was until I was one, and I was like, I guess this is it. And so it's an important, I think art has been an important way for me to understand the world. It has been an important way for me to contribute to the production on the continent. It has been really important in also like creating dialogue and bridging gaps between people. My family is always my core place. It's where I start with every project that I have, and also where I'm from. Being from Lesotho, in a space that doesn't have necessarily a very cultivated, a kind of traditionally cultivated art audience, or like platforms for art, there are no galleries, etc. I've always had to consider that when creating things, when curating things wherever I am in the world. What does it mean to be a curator? And I think the role was to create a platform for engagement and dialogue and bringing people together to discuss something and think about the world differently and challenge ideas. in the world. So yeah, it's been an important way for me to do those things. I'm still doing it. I'm still learning. Yeah, and it's just an honor to be part of this ecosystem.
I grew up KwaNdebele. Think about Dr. Esther Mahlangu's work. Every house had iyagwalwa, that's what you call it in Ndebele. So it had those paintings. So every house had a randavel at the end that had that. And I don't know, we didn't always consider it art, you know. The first time I formally saw the work of Mpemba's work, I thought, this looks familiar. And I couldn't place it for the longest time until one day I bought our set work from primary school, Igoda. And it is illustrated by Pemba. So in a lot of ways, I think this is a difficulty about art, because in a way, life and art are not separable. And therefore, there's a risk of it taking it for granted and not assigning value and appreciation to it, which is why the work that you do is so important.
I agree, and I think it's like there's design, there's dance, there's visual art, but the truth of the matter is it's all creative, cultural production, and it's all kind of trying to tackle one thing, which is like interaction and engagement and curiosity, inquiry about the world. And we're all one somehow. One of the most interesting projects I curated was a set of conversations that actually didn't even have any visuals other than the people. The people were the things. And it was important for me to, and this is my curatorial master's project, and I was expected to do a visual art thing, and I was like, what's the purpose of curating? And that for me changed everything about how I see art.
What's the balance sheet of art, of different parts of arts that you represent, A, and B, how do we feel about the exportation of African art? I ask because a few years ago there was quite a large estate art exhibition, and quite a lot of work was sold abroad. And there was quite a lot of split views about we're losing a lot of in this case, this art was paintings, that we're losing so much of our art and we're not retaining enough of our critical art. So although, that represents a market, so I'd love to hear your perspective on both of those. How's the money situation? And, is it okay to lose some of it, so to speak? Yeah.
The role of corporate entities certainly in South Africa and in the last 10, 20 years or so. And we know that it's partly because of kind of I guess our economic and social political situation as a country, that there are sort of other areas that have required more attention, so to speak, but that doesn't mean that it should be at the detriment of the art or creative economy. And this is something I think our former president, Thabo Mbeki, kind of alludes to in how he kind of talks about the role of the arts, in how we would have imagined or should imagine it, and certainly in his ideas of the African Renaissance, right? But I think then the role of the corporate entities becomes important in what they've done in filling that gap. And certainly Standard Bank, as you know, if you're speaking about how long we've supported the arts, in various, I think, areas. I mean, I look at the African art collection that we jointly own with Wits University, and that kind of foresight of building a collection of that nature and being very specific around what you are preserving here and for what reason. And it has kind of, I think, addressed that, somewhat that issue, or at least cultivated that practice of valuing what we have, and thereby keeping it here for us to kind of use, whether it's for research or for creative kind of inspiration for young. I mean, Laduma uses that collection a lot for his inspiration around his government. He's now opened a store in New York, and to think that the roots of that is primarily from that collection and kind of going back there to look at it. So our role, I think, as a corporate entity becomes important in how we've chosen to support the arts, that it's not just, in an image sense, but again, going back to how we grow the continent, but also, keeping it here for for generations to come.
For me, you know, coming from a different context where we're the people that are selling the art, it's been an interesting thing to watch how this landscape has shifted. The kind of collectorship landscape has shifted in the past 14 years. I only have that measure because that's the duration of time I've been selling art. And, you know, I would say when I started working at the gallery, I couldn't identify many or any Black collectors from South Africa. And so that was, and that was interesting and surprising to me at the time, but also in some way I think it spoke to the newness of art, or kind of art gallery, the art gallery structure in South Africa, kind of, but then also I think it was about relatability and the work that the galleries were doing to really integrate with where they were. Over the years, we've really focused on that, and it's been tremendous to watch it develop and grow. And, you know, my friends are now buying art. Young Black women are collectors of art. And it's so exciting to me to see how we're also transforming our ideas of culture. And I think it's something that you said, Funeka, about how we don't see, we kind of tend to not see, you know, art somehow as something that was always a part of our lives, that is there, that is reflects us. It was always kind of introduced, at least in a commercial sense, as something that was kind of a Western idea, like collectorship and the Western tradition of collecting and whatever. And it's shifted. We've started to own it and make it our own and understand the value of keeping art at home. Yes. You know, I'm so excited when I sell a really significant piece of work, piece of art to a local collection, especially a local collection with a public face. You know, the ability for it's really one of the most important things. The kind of potential for the artwork to continue to be seen more publicly is so important and exciting for artists. I work closely with an artist, Tenjiwe Nikinkosi, and through her work and the way that, you know, it reflects about kind of identity and Blackness and performing one's own identity, but really looking at hyper white spaces and understanding the absence of Blackness. So there's lots of people relate to that work that aren't from an art context, that they just naturally see themselves reflected. And through that, I've managed to find I've started a number of conversations with Black people from South Africa, interested in art suddenly, and it's like, okay, but it spoke to me in a way that is so powerful. And as a result, I've managed, you know, I'd say like more than 50% of the collectorship of her work has been Black, which is unprecedented. It's like totally unprecedented and incredible, and it speaks to what it means to see yourself reflected. So it's been an interesting and exciting development over the years.
Yeah, for my company, certainly we are very much dependent on those international dollars and euros, pounds, because I realized many years ago that carrying a begging bowl was not helping us. It was not sustaining the organization at all. And we needed to create a business strategy that was going to firstly give us power in order for us to understand the value that the product is giving. And with that, we can then sell it, you know, all over the world. And it's what keeps us going. But also we realized there is also a growing, at least 4 million middle-class Black people who want to access theaters, who wants to go to, but we need products that are speaking directly to them. So that shifted in a way that we're making work, which is tailored now mainly to that particular group of people who are the next, you know, the new consumers of art. And we changed the way we make music, so we make productions that are in our own languages. We speak directly to the people. And that changed also, you know, the environment in terms of our theater. When it started, it was 70% white, maybe about 30% black people. Now we're sitting on the reverse side. We're sitting on 70 to 30. Reverse, so, and that for me speaks to the power of knowing your value, but secondly, knowing exactly what that environment needs and how can you tailor-make the productions to speak directly to that particular group of people that you're targeting.
Yeah, you make a very good point about the dollars and euros that also contribute towards the production that we do. Part of my role as well is I'm always traveling because our job is also as cultural ambassadors of some self-appointed, of course. And we make a point to exhibit in the major art fairs around the world. We make a point, we applied, for instance, to Art Basel, which is like the most prestigious art fair in the world, 4 years, and kept getting rejected, but persisted until we were let in. We did not kind of show in the fringe fairs, we did not show in because this is the tendency, right? It's like African galleries will show in the kind of African art fairs, and we wanted to be on the international blue chip gallery stage. So we persisted, and we persisted for our artists. We needed them to be visible alongside, the most important artists in the world, because they are part of the most important artists in the world. And that tenacity is the theme of the day. The tenacity to keep to persist, to keep insisting that you are important and insisting that you be seen and be taken seriously was a really important pillar in the making of our gallery and the kind of furthering of artists' careers internationally. So yes, a week from now I'm going to London to go and persist again and insist that our artists be and it's been wonderful and incredibly important in developing their careers.
Absolutely, in the main table. Absolutely. I absolutely. I agree fully with what you said, and this has also been my drive to ensure that we don't get packaged in those spaces where they say we've got an element of African dance as part of the main festival. No, I want to be on the main festival, not be part of that kind of thing, because that's not the work we make. We make work that is globally appealing, and we want to be on those global stages. Hence, we are able to now to go to the Kennedy Center. We're able to go to the Sydney Opera House because of the fact that we've said, no, we're making work that is of global status.
Are Africans doing business with one another in arts? So is this intra-Africa trade actually happening?
Interesting question. And maybe to answer that, and I'm speaking from the experience of dance, is that there are no bilateral agreements in the continent. There are lots of bilateral agreements internationally. When I'm speaking internationally, in Europe, in America, in South America, those make those conversations to be easier because then the governments from countries have made these agreements. There might be agreements in the continent, but they're not being fulfilled by financial backup for those kind of conversations and exchanges and the collaborations to happen. There's just no financial support for that to happen in the continent, and makes it harder.
I will say again, I just got back from Lagos, and I've been raving about Lagos to anyone who will listen to me. Yeah, I'm absolutely going back. I think we, for instance, as a gallery, have been kind of doing Art X Lagos, an art fair in Lagos, right? And we've done a few editions of it. There's cross-cultural, cross-national exchange. We try and, we've hosted our Lagos people here for kind of art fair-related programming, and they have hosted us on the other side. And I think it's through culture that these collaborations are able to happen. Aside from, the restrictive kind of foreign policies that really make immigration nearly impossible. You know, culture is the way that we transport things. You know, we couldn't necessarily, you know, there was a year at an art fair where this kind of Nigerian gallery couldn't make it because the visas were denied. And so as a protest, or as a support, you know, we offered we assisted with putting together a kind of a statement in an art fair booth that was like, could not be here because our visas were denied. And that was an important statement. So I think culture is the way, even in music, I see it in music, and culture is the way that collaboration is able to happen and across borders that are otherwise difficult to penetrate. But I think we need to do much more of it. It's very clear to me that there's a lot of potential that we're not yet tapping into. And I think cultural practitioners need to find ways to you know, rally and do those things together.
Why is it that all the big money names are males? Art.
That's not true. I got some big money names. I'm joking.
You see what I mean? The $1 million
Yeah.
kind of pulling artists
Yeah.
tend to be male. Why is that?
I mean, I suppose I can certainly try and answer that from a scholarship point of view, because I've always believed that is, I mean, it's one of the driving forces that also made me pursue going up to PhD level to like in this art thing. And scholarship is important around how we document, right, our artists, and certainly then women artists, writing about them. And I think the male artists is certainly because they've got these engines, this, you know, that kind of propel them, whether it's articles, you know, media kind of, you know. So scholarship becomes so important in how it, I think, shapes, you know, and progressing, learning about these artists. Oh, Dr. Esther Mahlangu right now. She needs a book, a serious book that documents, you know, her practice, not just the exhibition, yes, and I know it's coming alongside that, but that's where then I think the provenance, right, starts to build in terms of her then, yeah, being taken seriously, yeah.
We spoke about that. People like Kentridge having all these books about him gives depth to his work, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
every production he makes, whether it's an opera, whether it's a film, is accompanied by a book.
That's
That's
critical.
true.
A previous Standard Bank young artist.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we produced, as Voyan, if we have to talk about the Standard Bank young artist, we've produced 3 already, myself included, you know, in 2002, and then there's Luyanda Sidia and Lulu Langeni. And again, we've been on this push for female choreographers, female directors to take on the space. And my company, which I mean was one of the first to have a CEO as a female, in a dance company. So we're trying by all means to say we've got to invite people to the table because they're not gonna come by themselves, because it has been so male dominated that people are even seeing that, in fact, I don't belong there. So we've got to open up these spaces and invite people in.
Who's your favorite artist of any genre? You go first.
James Carey Marshall, he's an American African, but I've always, and I think in how I've also thought about art history representation, the seriousness of having imaging yourself, and then, you know, we're talking about things that reflect who you are. His trajectory, he's articulated it so well to a point where I think his work, I think, inspired an entire generation of like artists, of Black portraiture. There was a whole stage of that, and that came from him in how he articulates this idea of being in spaces like galleries and museums and reflecting who you are. So he's always stayed with me,
Well, for me, it's Zanele Moholi. I think them being such an amazing portrayal of life, but also representing the minority who've been oppressed for so many years. So I think for me, that's the person,
I will say the artist that is at the fore of my mind right now, and also that is like a kind of really important female South African artist who I studied at school, and I used to read photocopies and cut out the images of her work, is Penny Siopis. And for me, as like a young kind of up and coming art student, from that point until the point where I kind of co-own a gallery that represents this artist is major. And I think Penny is a multidisciplinary, really incredible artist who has pushed the boundary of painting and video art in a way that is really under celebrated. And this is one artist that I think, yeah, she's having her moment right now. She has a big retrospective in Greece, and I think it's so important. And the kind of curatorial concept of the whole premise was to foreground women artists who haven't really been looked at in the way that they should have been looked at. So she's important. She's tenacious and like powerful.
So firstly is Mary Smanda.
Yeah.
Love, 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 love. I think that's the first time that I saw her work. You remember the series around domestic workers? Yeah.
The purple.
Yeah, when I saw it, I was like, this is what my grandparents are.
Yeah.
So there's this one called I'm a Lady, which is like in a blue sort of ball gown. And I sort of like, it just represented my childhood in the sense that I was raised by powerful women who the world saw as domestic workers, but they were unbelievably smart and bold women. So that was that. And I love all the genres that she does. I also love Deborah Bell. She does beautiful sculptures. I love her work around mythology and African mythology, how it's captured. Yeah, those are my two favorite.
So I live with the artist. So, and she's a dancer. Ipiling Merafe. I like watching. That's my artist, one. And then there's a guy called Sarai. Now this guy, I found him. I was working with him at Business Day, and he was a kid, and he was a graphic designer. And I told him then that you shouldn't be here. You should be doing art. And now there's a piece of art. There's two artworks in my house. There's one of his. He was friends with Double HP, so he has this artwork in dedication to Double HP in my home. And I've seen recently he's back on the scene. And then there's Mtombeni, a guy called Mtombeni. I've got the first name is gone. Beautiful, like charcoal artworks and stuff like that. But I think Ipiling is my first one. And then you, Greg. After Ipiling, then it's you. Yeah, then you. And then these are my two, the rest of it, yeah? Beautiful conversation. I love the way you took over this conversation. This is what I really wanted from the series, that you come into it. I can see your passion. Thank you so much, Funeka, for inviting us to be here.
No, thank you. For me, as I said, my interest is an industry. And industry, that is something that is one of the things that we are really good at, that it grows, it thrives, that it gets all the support that it needs, and it continues to become globally recognized. And it's got two dividends, financial dividends, but also just emotional and heritage assets that go with it. So I'm so glad to be part of Standard Bank that sees this as part of the creation of wealth of Africans.
Gregor, I'll let you go.
Firstly, thank you for this enriching conversation. More than that, for me, I think it's also about how business continues or needs to continue to be part of the arts. You know, I think we cannot survive without the investment from business. But more importantly is that art in itself, makes us human. And therefore, the wealth of art is the wealth of humanity.
Thank you also for having me here. I think it's really wonderful for business to take art seriously. And I think, business is always seen as like the serious people thing, and our thing is like play. And it isn't, it's all one, and it's all, to the greater good. So having kind of been with many Standard Bank Young Artist of the Years over the years, I think it's been a really important role that Standard Bank has played that I think others should follow. It would be wonderful to see more of that happening. Buy art. Art is an investment.
Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. And I think certainly for me, being part of a financial institution that whose core business is not necessarily in the arts, but being able to have an opportunity where they see the value of the arts in not just growing the region, the continent, but also how I think it's been important for us as Africans to continue kind of reflect in the sense of humanism that you're talking about. And certainly the arts is what always kind of propels or allows that to happen, is this humanist kind of warmth that I think Africans always carry in their creativity. Yeah.
Thank you all.
Now,
Brilliant.
our conference for now.
Thank you so much. But thank you again.
Thank
for joining
you.
us.
Thank you.